You don't need to deadlift more than once per week, and today I'm going to tell you why. The deadlift should be one of your pillars of strength development, as it offers fantastic force production training. It also acts as one of our main postural assistance exercises and a key tool in our hypertrophy toolbox. Now, this actually shines a light on one of the interesting sides of programming, and that is why do some exercises, like the bench press or strict press, respond well to high frequency 3, 4 or 5 times per week, while others, such as the deadlift, respond well to once or twice per week. Exercises exist on a spectrum. Some are very low impact and don't fatigue us massively, while others are very high impact and fatigue us massively. The deadlift sits right on the far edge of this spectrum. It is highly impactful and fatiguing. This is great for us as athletes. It's the sledgehammer in our toolbox. We can get a relatively small amount of training done, take up very little of our overall training time, and get a huge stimulus from it. But with this come some issues. When we're programming, we're always thinking about two variables: minimum effective dose and maximum recoverable volume. For our sport-specific movements, our prioritized movements, or our competition lifts, we want to be moving the athlete into the maximum recoverable volume bracket over the course of a training cycle as they get closer to competition. Getting weightlifters to have more and more time with the snatch and clean and jerk, getting powerlifters to focus more on the competition, squat, bench and deadlift, and getting our athletes to do more and more of the lifts that we've specifically picked for them to be the main aim of their cycle. Then, for our accessory pieces, whether that be strength, hypertrophy or whatever, we're always looking to be moving from a large amount of volume and frequency towards minimum effective volume or dose over the course of our training cycle. In the case of the deadlift, our maximum recoverable volume is not very high. Let's just say it how it is. You can do near maximal overhead press multiple times per week and you won't be too badly off. Sure, you'll be sore, but you won't start falling apart. But this isn't true for the deadlift. The deadlift uses much heavier weights and taxes our systems far more, and so it just has a greater negative impact on us than the smaller lifts do. The use of this term, smaller lifts, should be expanded on slightly. By smaller, I mean there's less range of motion, or smaller muscle groups being used, or less muscle groups being used, or less overall load. All of this just takes less energy, they deplete less muscle glycogen, degrade our muscle tissues less, and vitally require far lower levels of neurological activation than the super high force or high speed movements do. This leads to the trailing tail of fatigue being much longer for the deadlift than for many of our upper body pieces or even lower body isolation work. Some of these reasons are obvious. If you're using more muscle and you're doing more work per rep with each of those muscle groups, you have an inherent understanding that you're using more energy. A simple comparison would be using an air bike versus using a stationary bike and getting to 100 calories on the monitor as quickly as possible. You'll get there much faster on the air bike using the handles to incorporate back, arms, shoulders, upper back to spin that erg rather than just using your legs pushing against the pedals. Also, the more of that muscle tissue you're using and working, the more likely you will be to induce higher levels of damage within those tissues because the relative weights will be far higher. And so, your cost of recovery is going to be much higher. It's the equivalent of having to repair a small hole in your drywall versus having to rebuild multiple walls across your entire house. Think bigger tears in more muscles. Also, we have to think about the greater post-exercise oxygen consumption after a set of deadlifts. So, our body has to work very hard to bring our system back to baseline once we finish training. It works for hours to restore ATP, creatine phosphate stores, catecholamines and cortisol levels, to thermoregulate itself and to remove lactate. The bigger and the heavier the lifts, the longer this tail of exercise recovery becomes. Moving on, let's look at these catecholamines. Neurotransmitters, adrenaline, noradrenaline, or epinephrine and norepinephrine if you prefer. These magic little fairies are at the center of one of the main reasons why we can still make good progress only once per week. Imagine for a second your muscles are remote control cars, thousands of them, all with their own little self-contained motors, all with their own batteries, sensors and command units, but to turn these cars on we need a remote control. Our brain, spinal column and nervous system, or PNF and CNS, make up this remote control. Now, what you need to consider here in relation to the deadlift is that the remote control is triggering many of these RC cars, triggering them to drive as fast as possible. The problem here lies in the fact that our brain doesn't have an unlimited battery, and the replenishment of these neurotransmitters takes time, rest and energy. So deadlifting less frequently can lead to stronger muscle contractions than deadlifting very frequently. So these are some of the reasons why deadlifting too frequently mightn't be great and why lower frequency might work. And there's valid arguments as to why it's a positive thing to only have to deadlift once per week, the carrot instead of the stick. For most of us, we aren't looking to do more training. Most of us are looking to do the most efficient route possible to success. Most people, athletes, weightlifters, powerlifters, can realistically only get 2 or 3 good quality sessions in per week. And so this means the deadlift is going to be an amazing tool for strength training, hypertrophy work, postural work, assistance work. You get a lot of work done in a short amount of time without having to do it every day or a few times per week. The other major factor here is that for almost everyone, the deadlift is not the prime driver of deadlift performance. For most people, powerlifters included, the deadlift is predominantly driven by increases in the back squat. So there are advantages to practicing the specific skill of deadlifting and developing the specific postural prowess and grip strength needed to maintain good positions. But if you found your deadlift has plateaued and you need a guaranteed way of hitting a PR, I'd simply suggest adding 15 to 20 kilos to your back squat and you'll be on course for a large deadlift PR. The leg, back and postural strength we need to hit big pulls is trained very well by the back squat. A lift which most of us are already going to be doing twice per week, and so we don't need the excessive exposure to fatigue we will get from multiple deadlift sessions per week. If you enjoyed this and you want more in-depth training information, please check out the Sika Strength newsletter. There are different newsletters for every group we represent. So whether you're weightlifting, powerlifting, hybrid training, or you're doing S&C for sport, we also have a Sika Strength newsletter. So what's going on in Sika Strength? If you want these kind of deep dives, they're all there. Multiple emails per week. Please follow the link below and you'll find everything you need.